Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for being here. We are very excited to present to you the Kundalini Experimental Project. Joining us today is Mike Molina, founder and president of the Emerging Sciences Foundation. I'm Linda Molina. I am a board member and the secretary and treasurer. And from the UK, Laz, an awesome volunteer and board member.
Hi, guys.
We want to thank you, first of all, for joining us and for being here with us, because a lot of where we are for the Kundalini Experimental Project, we would not be here without you. You contributed in some way, donations, surveys, time, volunteering. We really appreciate you.
We absolutely do.
Yes. So I'm ready. Today, we want to take you into what the Kundalini Experimental Project is. We want to show you a little bit of our research findings. We're going to demo the awesome app that's been created for this project. We're going to look into the theories that we're using of awakening Kundalini, and we'll talk to you about the next steps. And we'll also have a Q&A at the end, so please jot any questions down that you want to ask.
Okay.
Yeah. So, Mike, you want to take it away?
Yeah. So again, welcome everybody. I just wanted to thank everyone for taking time on their weekends, or if you're watching this as a recording, thank you for watching it. Again, you're watching this video not because we just sent an email out to everybody. As Linda mentioned, everybody who's been invited to the event has contributed in some way. The majority of people watching this recording have probably gone through our initial survey, our Kundalini profile survey or spiritual profile survey, and you went through the hundreds of different questions that we asked, submitting data from anywhere between spiritual experiences, psychological experiences, physical experiences, and submitted your data. And we've been, over the past few years, actually looking at the data. Within the past 1 year, and especially during the past few months, we've really been looking at the data in depth, using a bunch of really cool techniques to analyze it, and have made a lot of different discoveries in the data. The data is actually a gold mine for us. It's something where we can continually go in, ask different questions, and see what's actually happening within the phenomenon of spiritual experience. So I'll get to that in a minute here. So I think the important thing to understand about how we are analyzing your data is that because we have a lot of different folks submitting data, hundreds of people around the world, it's a lot of data for us to go through. A lot of us have gone through the data manually and read your open text responses, but I think maybe even more powerfully, or maybe just as powerfully, we've also been applying a lot of statistical analysis techniques, very sophisticated techniques to the data. And there's a lot of fancy names for it, correlations analysis, factor analysis, but in the end, what it really boils down to is just finding grouped or correlated data that reveals distinct experiences. So on the right here is an example of a technique that we're using, a variant of the technique that we're using to look at the data. And you can see that it essentially clusters different types of experiences, in this case, into different groupings. So this is a good way to kind of visualize how we see the data from our end. So, as an example, this is just an example, but it could be that, green represents one type of experience, the black dots represent a different type of experience, blue and red, other different types of experiences. And the closer they are together, the more related they are. The most important research finding that we found in the data is something that we call higher consciousness. And this is something that has been mentioned many times. There are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of books written on enlightenment or higher consciousness or higher states of awareness. But to our knowledge, at least in modern times, no one's ever gone back and said, what is this experience of higher consciousness exactly? What is happening within the larger experience of spiritual awakening that gives rise to higher consciousness? How is it affecting people? Those types of questions are what we've been asking in our research. And so the important thing is that we've identified higher consciousness. We are able to define it pretty clearly, and I'll get into that in a minute. But we've also been looking at the psychological and physical indications of higher consciousness as well. And higher consciousness is not just an experience. It's not just something that you wake up one morning and you just feel a certain way. You feel happier or something like this. Higher consciousness is actually something that we're finding has profound psychological and even physical implications. So it's something that once you experience higher consciousness, there is a radical transformation in your personality, a radical transformation in the way that your senses are perceiving the world, and a variety of other things that happen during the experience and after the experience of higher consciousness that we'll get into briefly. So again, just another way of visualizing how we look at these correlations. This is an older diagram that has yet to be updated, but this is just another way of how we look at the data and how we correlate experiences of higher consciousness to other things. So for example, this is hard to read, but higher consciousness is sort of the darker blue, and it's closely linked up with an experience to the upper right, which is what we're calling ecstasy. So one of the components of higher consciousness, one of the aspects of it, is that there is a profound ecstasy that occurs. So I just wanted to step back for a minute before I go to the next slide here and just talk for a minute about higher consciousness, Kundalini, and its relationship to spiritual experience. And by the way, all of this, I'm setting the stage for the Kundalini experimental project. I'll demo that in a second so you can see where all this is going. But I think it's important to just take a big step back first and to talk about
how we look at it,
how we look at the experience of higher consciousness related to Kundalini and spiritual experience.
So we could all be on the same page.
Yeah, because ultimately in the course of the experimental project, we are trying to have participants achieve higher consciousness. That is our goal. There's a lot of other meditation programs out there. You can go online and Google, meditation program, and you can find hundreds of them out there. Excuse me. A lot of those are geared to get you to experience states of relaxation, states of peacefulness inwardly, but those responses are different than what we're trying to achieve through the course of our research. It's actually a much higher bar that we're trying to reach. I think that the average person sitting down meditating will immediately receive some benefits. Higher consciousness, though, is admittedly a rare phenomenon. It doesn't happen to everybody. Even those who attempt to achieve higher consciousness may not actually go into full-blown, what we clinically define as higher consciousness. They may achieve some level of spiritual growth. And ultimately, even if you're one of those people who, maybe it's your destiny to perhaps never achieve higher consciousness. That's really not for us or you or really anybody to decide. But if you can achieve some level of spiritual growth, of spiritual healing, of spiritual realization to get you further along the path, we think that that's a noble goal as well. But it's important to know where we're all headed. Higher consciousness, the goal of human evolution. Eventually, our theory says that eventually everyone will be in higher consciousness.
Yay.
Further down the line. It may take a while because we're talking about a slow process of evolution, but it's important to note that that is the goal of our research. So I'm just going to share briefly a diagram here. So if you look at all spiritual experiences combined, within that, there are a variety of different things that happen. There's out-of-body experiences. There's experiences of joy. There's experiences of transcendence, of wisdom, of light and sound, energy.
Different dimensions.
Exactly. People experience different dimensions, different worlds, all sorts of different things. You can only imagine how varied spiritual experiences are, probably as varied as the human race itself. But within the experience, within spiritual experience, there is one distinct type of experience that stands out above all the others, which we are calling higher consciousness. And the purpose of the first survey, all the data that you submitted, was to help us understand a little bit better what is higher consciousness? What does it look like? What are the characteristics? A lot of people who filled out the survey have had experiences of higher consciousness, and we want to see what factors are in common. So I'll talk about exactly what higher consciousness is like in a second. But the other important thing is that beneath the experience of higher consciousness, what we're also seeing is indications of a biological mechanism at work. And the reason that I say that is because in the survey data and in also various other literature and studies from people like Gopi Krishna and the Institute for Consciousness Research, again, as well as our data, what we're seeing is that there are definite physical and psychological symptoms that indicate to us that there is some form of biological activity taking place that is leading to the experience of higher consciousness. Specifically, we're seeing a lot of activity in the central nervous system, people reporting symptoms of or indications of energy running through the spine, running through the body. We're also seeing indications that the reproductive system plays a role in this process as well. So we're seeing in some parts of the data and in certain questions, we're seeing folks having some change to their to the reproductive system and the way that that functions. So now the question, what is higher consciousness? If we had to clinically define higher consciousness, and this is for the experimental project, this is the way that we are defining higher consciousness, is that it is a form of awareness where there is a direct perception of consciousness as an objective reality. So the way that I would maybe present an analogy or a metaphor to people who may have trouble understanding this, and I think, to be honest with you, everyone should have trouble understanding at least a little bit exactly what we mean by experiencing consciousness as an objective reality. But I'll explain it this way, is that normally all of us are perceiving the world, our thoughts, our senses, our emotions through some sort of invisible medium that allows us to collect all this information and create a perception of reality, our own individual perception of reality that is distinct to us. We don't perceive normally we don't perceive reality through someone else's consciousness. It's usually individual to the person. But in the experience of higher consciousness, that invisible medium, that let's say that canvas upon which life is painted, becomes now for the first time visible as an objective reality to the person experiencing higher consciousness. And that experience is so powerful, so overwhelming, that one of the other aspects of it is that there is an attainment of a type of bliss that is not possible to achieve otherwise. There is a realization that occurs that is not possible to put into words. We can approximate it by saying that it is a spiritual awakening, a revelation that occurs. There is knowledge and wisdom about the fundamental nature of reality that occurs. And again, going back to the first bullet point, it is that consciousness appears as the dominating reality, the foundation for the physical universe, the foundation for the mind, foundation for the body. And in that realization, there is a bliss, a happiness that is achieved that, again, is not possible otherwise. The other point here is that we're also looking at the symptoms and seeing that very likely there is an activation of some dormant activity of the central nervous system and reproductive system. So higher consciousness is not something that just happens and it is a purely mental phenomenon. What we're finding is that there are a lot of psychological transformative aspects and physical aspects that occur as a result of the awakening process. And lastly, yeah.
Those cells have to change in order to take in that higher frequency.
You know, the final thing I want to mention too is that according to this theory, and if you look at all the material that's out there, research by Richard Buck, research by Gopi Krishna, the Institute for Consciousness Research, even Pew studies and the research that we're doing, what is very apparent to us is that this experience of higher consciousness is becoming more and more and more of a facet of human life. Mystical experiences are happening more often to people, as confirmed through Gallup and Pew research. Our research confirms that this phenomenon is powerful and is something that transforms people's lives. But the theory of higher consciousness, or theory of Kundalini as we're presenting it, says that the geniuses and mystics of the past, and now the people living today who are experiencing higher consciousness, are actually showing signs of a form of awareness, a form of consciousness that the human race is evolving toward. We're evolving into a state of higher consciousness. And the name that we are giving to this emergent human species, this species that will eventually be the dominant human species on the planet, we are calling Homo cosmogenesis, which means one in whom the universe is born. And in case you're raising an eyebrow, the reason that we're calling we're calling this new emergent human species Homo cosmogenesis, one in whom the universe is born, is because normally all of us have the experience of being born in the universe. We're born on planet Earth, and we're this microscopic speck of life amid a vast universe. Mm-hmm. And during the experience of higher consciousness, that perception is reversed. A person experiences consciousness as the dominating reality. Very often they see themselves as one with this consciousness, essentially as a lord of the universe, spread out everywhere, infinite and omnipresent, omnipotent, and
hence the bliss.
Exactly, and hence the bliss, right? And so in that state, the role of the physical universe and the role of consciousness, those two things are reversed. And so that's where that name comes from. Okay, last thing before the actual demo here, I just wanted to get into a little bit about how the project works, and I'll go back to that slide in just a second. So there really is two main parts to the experiment. The part that you're going to see as a participant is a new mobile application, a free mobile application, very important, free and will always be free, that we've developed as a response to this research. So the application is called Brilliano. Most of you are familiar with it already, have gone in once to fill out the survey. The new mobile app is quite a bit different than the application that's available on the web right now. The Brilliano mobile app is specifically designed around the Kundalini experimental project and around collecting data associated with the project. And so a few things that this new app provides. First of all, you all have filled out the Kundalini profile survey, also known as the spiritual experience profile survey at the upper left. We have a new survey that's available.
Yay.
Called the personal background survey. Linda, did you want to maybe say a couple words about personal background survey? And
yes, I think it's very valuable, the second survey, because it brings in the two of them together. So the first one is your experiences. The second one, we're looking more at your beliefs and your behaviors and even your environment. How did those contribute to your experience, which is very valuable data to have both of those together. So we're really excited to be implementing that in here.
Yeah, the personal background survey, which you all will have access to shortly, I believe is going to be revolutionary in terms of our understanding of Kundalini and higher consciousness. And it's been a labor of love. Linda's probably spent more time with it than anybody, and it's been coming together over the past few years. So we're very happy to release that. But you all are used to filling out surveys. One thing that's new with the application is this idea of an activity tracker that allows you to track your progress as you are progressing spiritually. So whether it be tracking your day-to-day meditations or tracking a specific type of spiritual experience that you are having, the purpose of the activity tracker is to begin gathering that data and to also show you your own data. So what is based on this type of meditation that I'm doing, based on this activity, what does my spiritual progress look like? Are there things that help or hinder my spiritual progress? And that is something that the activity tracker will help everyone sort of get a handle on. The other part of this research project is specifically in the domain of the Emerging Sciences Foundation, and has to do with two projects that are in development currently. One is called Kundalini Discover, which is an open source software project that we are using to analyze Kundalini experimental participant data. So if you filled out the survey, if you submitted your results, Kundalini Discover is the actual software that we've used to analyze the data. And that software is freely available online, not the data, just the software. And it allows researchers around the world or volunteers to download the software and to analyze the data for themselves. And this is important because this research, we feel, is not something that belongs to the Emerging Sciences Foundation. It doesn't belong to me. It doesn't belong to Linda. It belongs to the world. It belongs to all of you. It belongs to the researchers of the world. And we are making our algorithms and our software as free as we can and open source as possible, so that any interested researcher or volunteer from around the world can participate in the analysis of this data. Speaking of which, one of the other components here is the Explorer project. This is meant as a data visualization project, currently under development. We hope that one day soon it will allow you as a participant, or as a volunteer, or as just someone from the public wanting to see what the data looks like. You can go in and look at visualizations of the data, explore the data, to get a better idea of exactly how we see all the data that you submitted. So we take all of those open source projects, and generate recommendations and insights. And this is where you come in as a participant. So through our research, we've come up with a number of different insights and recommendations that we're going to be continuing to grow and to evolve and to provide back to you as a participant. You can see in the diagram what we're doing is we're feeding those back into the Brilliano app. So all of the research that we've been doing, all of the recommendations and insights are going to be fed back to you through the app. You'll be able to go in there, look at the recommendations and insights, and tailor your own spiritual development plan, and then track the activity in the application itself. So really what the app is doing is providing the basics, what you need as a spiritual practitioner to use the data-driven insights that we're gaining from our research and apply them back to yourself and be able to track it in the app.
So your patience paid off.
Yes, some of you took the survey as long as 3 years ago, and we wanted to thank you for your submissions. I mean, all of that has definitely played a very powerful role in creating this application and the research project.
We haven't forgotten you or the urgent need in which this is needed.
And I just wanted to mention here, this is an area where Laz, who's on the line with us today, has contributed greatly in terms of the Kundalini Discover project. I've been working with Laz on that. Linda's been working on the survey. We've had a number of different volunteers and board members, including Michael Bradford, Glenn Payne, Corrine Lebrun, and all of them have contributed tremendously, and others as well, to the evolution of this project. So I wanted to also thank our board members and our volunteers once again. All of this hard work that you're seeing, these diagrams, these are the result of your support over the years. Even you as a survey participant, without your data, we could not have created these projects. So again, another thank you. So now we'll get into a Brilliano demo. This is just going to be a very short demo of the application that you'll be using as a Kundalini experimental project participant. And let me see if I can get this set up on my screen. One moment. So hopefully you're able to see that. Laz, give me a nod if you're able to see that. Okay.
No, I just see the slide.
Okay. Let me
Stop
try one more
sharing.
time. Now I'm going to share my whole screen here, and it's going to look a little funky.
I love the infinity.
There. How about that? Is that a little better?
Got it.
Okay, great. So I just wanted to show briefly the different parts of the application. The first part is the community aspect, which is basically a chat room for you to go in and chat with folks that are also taking the experimental project. So the idea is that you can come in, you can create a post, you can like and comment on other people's posts. And the reason that we've created this community section of the application is so that you as a participant have a community of people, that including volunteers from the Emerging Sciences Foundation, that you can interact with and rely on for support. And this is different than how we've been operating in the past. I think in the past, what we've done is collect data, and really the community aspect has not been that active. But
right, it was just on a side thing.
Right. It was, there was a chat feature in Brilliano, but it really wasn't being used for anything because we didn't have these insights, recommendations, and groups that will be making use of the recommendations and insights to awaken Kundalini. Now that we're doing that and providing our community insights and recommendations, we're going to need support, both from the Emerging Sciences Foundation and from each other. So the new community feature is designed to be very simple. It's designed to provide just the basic functionality that we need to communicate with each other as a community.
Keep in mind basic. There's going to be some features that I myself already noticed that aren't completely there. So just be patient. Maybe let us know about it. And
yeah, I'll definitely get to that, and we'll talk about how the application is going to evolve over time. So the other feature here that I would like to just call out is the research and insights. This is there's two parts here. One is where you have access to the surveys, so you can actually launch a survey from within the app. Right now, it's just Kundalini profile survey. Here it says in progress.
You can see Mike didn't finish it.
Yep, I am because I'm constantly working on this. It's
not complete.
It's not complete. So there are there is the ability to take surveys from within the app. And then there is also the functionality here to give you access to the insights and recommendations that are coming out of our research.
And I think you also meant to say that that's where the second survey is going to come in also. We're going to release the new survey, and this is where you'll be able to find it.
Yes. So when the second survey comes out, we'll all provide you instructions on how to access it. It's going to be through this section, again, through research and insights, and then through the research section here. The last component is the activity tracker, which I'm really excited about, and that is a piece of functionality, again, to allow you to track different types of experiences. So here, suppose one day I had a strong sensation of light or luminosity. I'm going to say it's very strong or high intensity, and there was also some energy running up the spine. I can go ahead and track those activities. They're successfully tracked. And I can go back to my history and look at the types of activities that I'm tracking. You can see that this layout is very simple. And as Linda mentioned, I just wanted to call out how we're actually developing this application. So let me go back and come out of the demo. So now that you've seen the basics of how the app works, you'll notice the first thing is that it's very simple, and that is on purpose. The way that this app will grow and evolve is actually through your feedback and advice. So every so often, we're going to ask you as a participant, after you sign up, we're going to ask you, of the features that are in the application today, what is missing? What do you want to see? What would be most helpful for you as a participant? Is it ways to visualize your data, your activity data that you're tracking? Is it better features in the community? Is it more clarity on the recommendations or insights? Or is it maybe something outside of the application? Do we need to hold practice group meetings with your group more often? Those types of questions we're going to ask, and the development of the experimental project and the development of the app will be based on your feedback as participants. And that's why we're limiting the initial number of participants. That's why this is a private event, because we want to make sure that you, as our most engaged, most active community member, that you have the ability to tell us how you want the application to evolve, how you want the program to evolve. And we're going to do our best to try to provide those things to you and communicate as much as possible back to you about where we're at in that development process.
So here's Laz. I know you've been patiently waiting, and here you go.
Yeah, I'll just say really quickly, as an intro to Laz, Laz has worked with us again for the past few months.
He's awesome.
On the experimental project in terms of like data analysis and everything. And a lot more than that.
He's helped us get to where we are here today.
Yes.
Quite literally, yes.
So Laz, I'm gonna go ahead and pass it off to you.
Thank you, guys, and very kind words. Not sure they're deserved, but thank you all the same. So hello to the potential participants out there. I am one of the directors at ESF. I will be taking part in the Kundalini experimental project in some fashion. I'm not quite sure how at the moment, but I'm sure we'll work that out. I wanted to give you a bit of background about myself as somebody who has awakened Kundalini. I believe I have awakened Kundalini, integrated Kundalini, and I'm now living in harmony with it. Although I understand that's a bold thing to say and very difficult to prove. I certainly wasn't trying to awaken Kundalini. It sort of happened to me as a result of other things that were going on. And some of what I'm going to say, if you're not aware of the whole Kundalini cycle, if you like, is probably going to sound a bit crazy. But I'm not crazy. And I know it happened. This stuff is real. Higher consciousness is absolutely real, and it will throw some curveballs at you. But you can deal with it. You can get through with it. And I think I'm an example of someone that's gone through the cycle and am now living harmoniously with Kundalini. So Linda and Mike, at any time, if you've got any questions for me, if you want to tell me to hurry up, if you want to tell me to explain something a bit further, feel free to chip in. But I will start. Sorry.
Oh, will do.
Thank you. So I'll start with a bit of background. So I'm 41 years old. I live in the UK. I was born in the UK from an English family. I'm married with 2 young daughters. I live on the south coast of England, although I'm currently among the dreaming spires of the city of Oxford, staying with some friends this weekend. One thing that interests me, and a particular goal for my journey with the ESF and for this experiment going forward, is to find out about blood groups, about genetics and heredity. For the records, I'm an O negative blood group, which I think is only 15% of the world's population. So it's quite a rare blood group, and I'm sure there's something linked to that and Kundalini. In terms of my current job, so I am a software test lead at a company in the south of England. My family I would say I was brought up traditionally Christian. I think England has been Christian for a long time. And while I'm not a practicing Christian and never have been, I think the sort of formative years of my life had Christian aspects. So my mother would take me to church as a child. The schools I went to were named things like St. Clement's and St. George's. So they were very Christian related sort of philosophies behind the schooling. I have a brother who hasn't shown any signs of any Kundalini awakening, so I'm not sure entirely about the heredity thing, and maybe, like I said, that Kundalini chooses you. You don't get to pick whether it's going to happen or not. Part of my childhood was growing up in Germany on military bases. My father wasn't in the military, but we traveled around with them as part of the government. He was working for the MOD. That was an interesting life experience for me because it gave me a view of a world outside of my own. At a very young age, I was able to see how people in the other parts of the world got on and lived their lives. So come teenage years, I didn't really have the wanderlust that many people that grew up in the same country have. I already knew how other cultures lived, albeit still European. And I didn't really have to go out and find out that a lot of people around the world have the same human experiences that we can have in our own country. I already knew that. I didn't have to travel to find that out. Mm. As a child, I suffered some odd illnesses. And looking back, I wonder, while I thought I was having a normal childhood, it may be the case that there were pointers in my early childhood to something happening later on in life. So as a young boy, I had many fevers, and I remember distinctly experiencing the sensation of having like puppet strings between my fingers. My parents would put me in a cold shower to try and stop it from happening, and I'd be saying, I can feel strings between my fingers. Other experiences, my mother tells me, although I hadn't remembered this, were that I would see things crawling up the walls that weren't there. I guess cockroaches or bugs or something. So very early on, there was something odd going on. Come my teenage years, I suffered badly from migraines, and the migraines I got came with a strong visual disturbance. So I got some fantastic insight into the sorts of lights and patterns that the human brain can project really on the world, because it's all internal. And I think that really triggered my interest in understanding what life was, in trying to find out what more there was outside of the normal human experience, and really started me off down a path that I'm still on today. I've always been curious. I think this is key to the spiritual experience, if not the human experience. I always imagine when you have a young child, I mean, I've been through this with my two daughters. One of the first questions they ask is why? And when you answer it, they ask why again, and then why, and then why, and then why. And it's something I've always done and carry on to this day. It's just this sort of relentless curiosity, trying to understand the world around me.
That's awesome.
Excellent. So I've always had a problem with authority, and especially misplaced authority. You get people that are put in positions they really shouldn't be in, and I've always rebelled against that kind of behavior in society. And unfortunately, I got into some trouble with the law. So as a youngster, I was a bit of a delinquent. But at an early age, getting in trouble with the law actually showed me that that was not the right way to go. And I quickly corrected my behavior. And from then on, I can honestly say that I've been fighting on the good side. I've seen something of the dark. I knew very early I didn't want to go that way. And ever since then, I've been pushing on the light side.
I was going to ask, Laz, so do you think that maybe those experiences when you were young of self-reform played a role in your own process of like Kundalini awakening and development?
I do. I mean, you hear about people that go through, you know, experiences of being locked up in jail or something, and it transforms them. Right. And I think, although my experience wasn't anything like that, something similar happened to me. And it was I think they called it at the time a short, sharp shock. And it definitely was. Mm. So one of the other attributes that I have is perseverance, really, just the will to keep on going. And I think that is key when you run into roadblocks, you run into difficulties, just to carry on no matter what. It sort of builds an inner core of strength. It builds character, I guess, and ultimately is the way to success, to, you know, fall 1,000 times and get up and try once more. Is really what life is about. That's one of the lessons of life, I think. Having gone through this process of becoming, should we say, good, I found that I was standing for something. For the first time in my life, I wanted to do right, and I wanted to tell people that were doing wrong that that wasn't correct. And again, this got me into trouble in the workplace when I was older. It got to the point where ultimately I was in a boardroom with the general manager of an international company, and I very calmly told him he was wrong. He very angrily told me he was right and I would be disciplined. And I said, fine, go ahead. Nothing bad happened to me as a result. And that guy left. So
Nice.
that was one of the fundamental parts of the precursor to my awakening, really. This then happened in 2013, Christmas of all times, in 2013. I basically had a spiritual crisis. I had two very young children at the time. One was 2, one was literally a couple of months old, and I was getting very little sleep. Something happened within me, and I had a moment of crisis. I started seeing signs everywhere, particularly numbers. I mean, you may be aware of the 1111 phenomenon. I was seeing 1111 on clocks, in books, out on signs, in shops, wherever, and also the number 1138 as well. And it was that number that basically caused me to look into Christianity. At the point of crisis, I thought, this must be a Christian thing. I've had a Christian upbringing. Let's dive into the Bible. Let's go to church. Let's figure out exactly what kind of spiritual help Christianity can give me. I was unfortunately disappointed with what the church had to offer. While I think the story of Jesus is excellent, it's an example of someone with cosmic consciousness telling their story and really trying to inform the world of how higher consciousness works. I think ultimately the church corrupted the message of Jesus Christ and turned it into a whole religion that it perhaps shouldn't be today. I later started reading about other religions. I had always had an interest in Far Eastern religions. I'd read the Bhagavad Gita. I'd looked into the Vedas. It was mostly Indian stuff that I'd looked into, a little bit of Taoist stuff and Zen. And then things started to click for me. So where do I go from this? Yeah, about age 30, looking back, I started practicing Raja Yoga. Now, while I hadn't linked my spiritual crisis to this activity, I think there was definitely some internal architecture going on. So it was prepping me for Kundalini to awaken, and I didn't realize at the time. Later, the spiritual crisis developed into what I would call my shock and awe Kundalini awakening. And I had 2 subsequent experiences, which I then saw as a sort of confirmation experience. And then the third one was a direction experience. So the first was really the big, the whole deal. It was the kind of the fear of death and overcoming that. It was the bliss and the feeling of joy and absolute love from our Creator. It did change my life. From that point on, I've not been the same person. One of the things that it has changed is the fact that I don't judge people anymore. I really find it difficult to get upset at things people do. I know their doing is somehow tied into their bondage. You know, I mean, I've had this great experience. I've had the ultimate spiritual experience, and now I just feel that nothing else matters. I mean, it seems silly to say that, but that is really how I felt. One thing I'd like to do, if I've got time, is to read a little bit from the journal I was keeping. So I've been an avid documenter of everything I do. And it's always been key for me to put dates down and times down and make sure that everything that happens has been logged in a journal. So if I may, I'd like to read basically my experience of samadhi that happened.
Oh, interesting.
So I wrote, and this was August of 2014, so this would be the confirmation experience that I spoke about. However, now I get another vision, and I find myself floating in space, bodiless, and with a truly astounding view of the cosmos. I look around, astonished by this all-encompassing hallucination. I, the viewer, does not exist, and yet I can turn and change my point of view, despite not having any appendages or any surface to push myself from. I've just been told dinner's ready. Excuse me. I will carry on and join them later. Beneath me is planet Earth and the moon. Our sun is ahead of me. I turn to see Mars and the other planets of our solar system as ever-decreasing orbs spaced out from the center. I feel the vastness of the universe and also the ability to mentally touch every aspect of it, regardless of distance. I can see the Milky Way as a bright curl of stars that fades into the distance, and I am feeling an amazing sense of peace and love. I realize that I have become one with God and that I have achieved the union of yoga. I am God and God is me. It feels so simple and yet previously unknown to me. I know that I've been here before, and I remember this experience from some time before my birth, but for the duration of my lifetime, it has been forgotten. It's like a genetic memory. Something in my DNA remembers, or maybe it's my soul, itself, which is connecting with the origin of life. I've come home and I have found final rest, like my brain is still and no longer processing anything. I was wrong before when I thought I attained moksha, but now, here it is for real. This is it, samadhi.
That's awesome.
So, I mean, one of the things that people who experience Kundalini always say is that it's indescribable, and I'm probably not doing it justice here, but at least I've had a go. I always felt that I wanted to try and put it down in words, and that was the best I've come up with. Even
That was
if
great.
it's not perfect.
That was beautiful, Laz. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
Yeah. I think that, go ahead.
I was just going to finish up by saying a bit about the ESF.
Okay.
So I've been working with the ESF for about a year now. Started as a volunteer, got heavily into the Brilliano side, met some brilliant people in there, and they really helped me sort of post-awakening. So I had a number of issues that needed to be resolved, and I've done those over the last year or so. I think the ESF has been the port in the storm that I was looking for. And working for you guys has been a privilege and an honor. When I read Gopi Krishna's works, it ultimately led me to you because his work had a legacy, and I went looking for that legacy. I believe the ESF is that legacy. And I want to continue helping people as he wanted to.
Oh.
The last thing I wanted to say is that as a kid, I never really felt I fit in anywhere. And as an adult too, I never seemed to fit with any group. I always felt different. I always felt an outsider. I wasn't interested in the same things that 90% of the people were. But now ESF, I think, is my tribe. I think I finally found somewhere where I fit.
You do. Yes. That's great, Laz. Thank you so much. That was amazing. And I think even though, yes, I know a lot of people say it's indescribable, but just putting into words in your experience, I think it helps people just have a gauge of what it is that is happening. What are the things that you can go through? And it's just amazing, those experiences. One can imagine it because maybe you're visual, but just imagine actually experiencing that. That's awesome. And we also very much value you.
Thank you.
Yeah, as I mentioned, Laz has been really instrumental to the development of our research. And so kind of dovetailing off of Laz's description of his own development and some of the things that he experienced, I just wanted to touch on two theories that we're putting to the test in this first round of experimentation. And these are standard practices and internal architecture. So just to explain how these are going to be used, we are going to begin the Kundalini experimental project experiment in about 5 days. So after this event, you're going to get a sign-up email, and I'll remind you at the end of the event. On June 29th, we're going to send out an email and you'll go ahead and be able to sign up into the Brilliano application and be able to log in. And what will happen is that you will automatically be placed in an experimental group. And everybody's going to get different recommendations and insights. We have a research methodology around that we will, once we're done with this first round of experimentation, we'll kind of explain to everybody how we did it and what we did. But the important thing is to understand that we're testing really two main theories associated with the awakening of Kundalini. The first one is called standard practices, and these are things that are tried and true, time-proven methods to awaken Kundalini that go back in some cases, 1,000 years or more. And some of these practices involve things like the 8 limbs of yoga. Many of you are familiar with those, but also things like the golden flower method, the sexual retention, the withholding, let's say, of your sexual energy, and applying that to higher consciousness, or applying that to your own spiritual development. It's important to call out that we're going to provide some specific recommendations around the practice of sexual retention, because it is powerful, and I think that educating people on why sexual retention is important is of utmost importance in this process, and our experiment will let us know one way or the other, hopefully, what if that's true.
Especially today, since the media wants you to believe that going all out and always, releasing those sexual energies is the way to go.
Yeah.
Which is not.
Right. So there needs to be some education there, I think. Yeah. The other piece is, asana and pranayama, which are basically stretching and breathing exercises to awaken Kundalini. So the idea there is that, those people in the experiment that will be applying standard practices, we're going to have a practice group for those people. We're going to try to help guide you through the process. And then through the activity tracker, we want to gauge your progress along the way.
But please note, too, that on that day, the new survey will also be in there. At least that's the hope. And once it is in there, we will be able to provide you the best feedback and recommendations if you take both surveys.
And that's a really good point, is that you've already taken one survey. The next survey that we have,
which I heard doesn't take long. That is pretty fast.
So if you can provide us that additional data, we're confident, again, that it's going to be revolutionary in terms of our understanding of Kundalini. Mm-hmm. So the other theory, aside from standard practices, is internal architecture. And this has to do more with psychological factors around the awakening process. So humility, love, self-reform kind of aspects as similar to what Laz was talking about. And so we're going to be experimenting on really both of these and providing specific recommendations for both internal architecture and standard practices to awaken Kundalini.
Yeah, and if you haven't already seen more of Laz's experience, go ahead and go to our YouTube channel, and there's some videos there where he takes you more into his experiences and what is done for him, which I believe are awesome videos.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
So I want to get into at least a few minutes of Q&A briefly at the end here, but also just talking about next steps to you as a participant. So we talked about how we researched the data, what we found, higher consciousness, a lot of the factors that are related to higher consciousness. We actually have a model, if you fill out our survey, of determining the different levels of experience of higher consciousness. So there's a rating, sort of a rating scale that we use. And it's not that if you're higher up on the scale that you're better. We actually need everybody. We need people who are not experiencing higher consciousness and people who are experiencing higher consciousness, so we can tell how to move everybody together toward the experience of higher consciousness. We walked you through a demo of the application, and then we talked about, again, some of our research findings that we're going to be putting to the test during the course of this first phase of the experimental project. In terms of next steps, though, very briefly before we get into Q&A here, everyone's going to receive a registration email and a liability waiver immediately after this event. The liability waiver is there because we are providing recommendations that you'll need to put into practice. And it will include instructions on, instructions on how to download the app. If you sign up after this event, you'll have 5 days to fill out the registration form. On June 29th, we're going to be sending out an email with login instructions for you as a participant. And we'll be sending you additional follow-up emails after that with more information on how the experiment is going to be conducted, practice groups, what do those look like, and then also you're going to be getting the additional survey that we mentioned, the personal background survey, and I think most importantly, involvement not just from the ESF volunteers, but hopefully involvement from each other as a community of participants. So those are the next steps. Let us know if you have any questions there. I think now would be a good time maybe to get into to Q&A.
Okay. Quickly, as you're going into Q&A, I just wanted to show you guys my 7-year-old's artwork behind us. He put them there for us to display.
Very nice.
Special request.
Yes.
Okay.
So do we have any questions?
Let's check.
So it looks like not too many. We'll go ahead and just get started with some that we have here. I really like this question. Go ahead and ask it.
Okay, Linda, you'll go first. What are your thoughts as to the potential global impact of this project?
You know, I like using this little analogy. It's like I believe we've all heard it. Gandhi says, "Be the change you wish to see in the world." And I feel that with this research, that can actually happen. We look outside of us, and it's a really, really unstable, unsustainable, and so much inequality out there. And we wonder, what can we do? With this research, we are finding that first one must transform, because the moment that you do, that is where now you seek to be in service to change the world around you. You know, you're not blaming anymore. You're not a victim anymore. Now you are an active doer and changing. And that's why I really like this research and the direction it's going. Mike, the same questions. What are your thoughts as to the potential global impact of this project?
Well, I'll actually pass it off to Laz, and then I'll
Okay.
go last. Laz, do you want to chime in again?
Yeah, sure.
Your thoughts?
Well, clearly, I think all of our leaders around the world should be leaders that have awakened Kundalini. I mean, this experience will really lead humanity down the right path. At the moment, we have leaders that are, you know, millionaire businessmen. We've got, you know, sort of MPs and PMs around the world that have come from families of, you know, other leaders, and they get it through hereditary. I think there's a fair amount of corruption in leadership as well. And possibly the most corrupt often make it to the top. And all of these bad leaders are not taking humanity in the right direction. We clearly need some Kundalini awakened leaders to take humanity to the next level.
Oh, I love that one. Yeah, agree.
I agree 100%. I mean, knowledge and education of this process of spiritual awakening and higher consciousness, and scientifically demonstrating that higher consciousness is the target of human evolution, is really the core of our research. The first step to that is going to be to scientifically prove that Kundalini is a biological mechanism that results in higher consciousness, and that it is an intelligent mechanism. It works intelligently in the body to lead us to this state of higher consciousness.
Biological. Yeah.
I think in terms of, you know, the global impact of this project, what I would like to see, it really has to do with a lot of the work that Linda's done with the personal background survey, which is what are the life characteristics, circumstances, environments, mental attitude that are best suited for this process of spiritual awakening. And I think what we're going to find is that a lot of the behavior and thought out there, especially a lot of the behavior and sort of worldview that is projected out by our world leaders, is absolutely incompatible and diametrically opposed to this process of spiritual awakening. And there is a reason for that. But I think the more important thing is that we understand as a planet the appropriate way to live in harmony with this biological mechanism, and to remold our systems, remold our structures and institutions in our own lives to be in more harmony with this energy. And I think that will set the course of human development, hopefully for eons to come. So next question. What questions are you most interested in seeing answered from this phase of research, including the personal background survey? Laz, did you want to go first here?
I'm struggling to answer this one myself. I think, as I said earlier, I think that there's a lot to hereditary, to genetics with Kundalini awakening. I'd like to see some sort of correlation between people's responses and those topics.
Absolutely. Yeah. Lyndon, what questions are you most interested in seeing answered from this phase of research?
Mainly my own little theory is that environment plays a huge role. And so I want to see that. I want to see the research showing that how with a proper environment, a nourishing environment, that one can awaken in a healthy way, so that we can start saying, oh man, our current way of living is probably not the best.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And it kind of goes off of the, what we want to see happen in the world as a result of the project. We have a couple questions that I wanted to address. Andrew Miller asks, he says, I don't have a smartphone. Is it possible to download the app on my laptop? The answer is yes. We may make a web version accessible. There are some caveats there. The web version of the application won't be as secure as the mobile version. If you have an iPhone or Android, there's a little bit extra layer of security there. But I think if we get more requests, Andrew, and for your one example, and there was another person here that had a +1 on your comment, I think we need to start thinking about releasing this as a web application as well. So I'll get back to you on that. Once we finish this event, we'll kind of take a look at how we are releasing the app for this first phase. That's really the important part. And then once we have that figured out, then we'll get back to you.
It's pretty awesome you don't have a smartphone.
Yeah, yeah, it probably a lot more suitable environment to the awakening if you're not always checking your messages.
Right.
And then someone else had a question. They said, I experience reality as consciousness-based, but that it's subjective, not objective. Do you see that as a contradiction to the experience of an objective consciousness you list? So I'll make a pass at that, and then I'll re-ask the question. Laz and Linda, if you guys want to chime in. I think, first of all, a normal human being, the vast majority of us don't even experience consciousness at all. So I would say if you're having an experience of consciousness, in other words, an intelligence that is all pervasive, an intelligence that is everywhere, a sublime reality beyond what normal human consciousness is able to perceive, I think you're probably one of the rare people who is now beginning to have this experience of higher consciousness. So even though that experience may not be as concrete as you might maybe want it to be or think it should be, or hearing us speak, how you're interpreting what we're saying, I think that the sign that you're experiencing consciousness at all as a phenomenon that you're able to then perceive is a good sign. According to our research, you're starting to now climb the ladder up to higher consciousness. But again, it would depend on your experience. There's a lot of factors in the development of higher consciousness. So, Laz, Linda, again, the questions about an experience of consciousness that's subjective versus objective. Anybody else want to chime in?
So I'd just like to say that the consciousness is it. That's the only game in town. There's so many people out there sleepwalking through their lives. They're like zombies. They react instinctively, often angrily to things. People need to wake up, really. Consciousness is the only game in town.
I second that.
We have another question. In addition to the biological aspects, does the research include psychological issues? Someone here is going through a Kundalini awakening and the psychological symptoms are very hard. This is not something that's rare, I think. Very often, and let me just go back here. I want to make sure we're tuned in correctly. Okay. We hear very often that people are having a difficult time with their process. The Kundalini awakening process is an acceleration of biological activity. It's an acceleration of mental evolution. And so there are a variety of factors that we think are responsible for the awakening being an easy and smooth process or a hard process. And actually the personal background survey that's launching with the application is specifically meant to dig into those factors. So to answer that question, I would say one is that we are interested in further digging into the psychological factors through the personal background survey. But two, we've also done a lot of research on the psychological factors as part of this first survey, and we can tell you a little bit about some of the more common negative psychological and even negative physical responses that people have from their awakening process. And I think the really important thing is for us to continue research on how to make that process smoother. And that's what this next phase really is all about. So we're working on your behalf to answer that question.
If I might chip in on that one, I'd like to add that my experience was a morbid one. Mine was extremely difficult. I called it earlier shock and awe. And certainly the shock part was like walking through the fires of hell. It was incredibly difficult. One of the most difficult things I've ever had to do in life. But I came through it. I was able, somehow, there was some sort of inner strength within me that was able to put all this bad karma from the early part of my life and possibly previous lives to one side, to get through that and to come out a much better person.
That's great. And it's important, I think, for everybody to note that, you know, Laz, as an experiencer of Kundalini who's gone through positive and negative indications of it, you know, it's important for us as researchers. I think one of the main differences between this type of research and other types of research is that we as the researchers, we need to also be experimenting with ourselves. And that's where this phrase, you are the scientist, you are the laboratory. Many people have come up with that phrase independently over the years, but it's important to note that everyone here should be of a scientist mindset when observing the interchanges happening. They should be experimenting with themselves, being safe, being cautious, but also being having the perseverance to continue forward with those practices and seeing if we can indeed awaken Kundalini in you as a test participant.
And if I can add in again there,
yeah.
There's often a problem with science and, say, spirituality coexisting. Now, I'm a firm believer in the scientific method and the proper application of that. And I think that it can be used to understand Kundalini, can be used to document how it works and explain it to the world. On the reverse side of this, I think there's an awful lot of scientists that are religious, that do let their religious beliefs interfere with their work, and they kind of push the scientific method to one side, and they really shouldn't be doing that as scientists.
Agreed. And you know, one of the arguments out there right now is that, oh well, and people like Sam Harris and others out there label mystical experience as a form of delusion. Well, that may be true if it were not for the case that this type of observation has been repeated over thousands of years, that it results in a biological change in the body, that it's also associated with genius and many of the other amazing discoveries that have happened over the past few millennia, and that the experience itself of this objective experience of higher consciousness is the foundation of religion, of spiritual experience, of morality even, and that the majority of our most lofty moral concepts come from this experience of higher consciousness. So scientists usually say, well, you can see how good a science is by the way that it works, by the way that the technology stemming from it works, or predictions. Well, religion and spiritual experience, higher consciousness, is a form of technology. It's a form of inner technology and or inner science. And the technology, the output from that, is moral conduct, moral thinking, that 2,000 years ago, when it was, when it was said, love thy enemy, love thy neighbor, and now we fast forward 2,000 years into the nuclear age, we can see that development, that this moral development that occurred as a result of higher consciousness and spirituality is in fact the best suited temperament for humankind today, 2,000 years later. So I would say, in terms of science and technology, and if you consider the moral evolution, moral developments of humankind as let's say a form of technology or scientific output, that this is really, really important stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So, so with that, we're just about at the end of time. I think we had one other question.
Well, there was a few more, but there was one person who was wondering if we heard about Shaktipat. And so as far as triggers go, we know that there's many, many triggers. I believe J.J. Semple wrote a great book on different triggers, and that is a very valid one. The process, I mean, the purpose really for this is to just help anybody who's undergoing any type of experiences, or if you're not even undergoing anything, or if you're already up there, just so that we can help provide feedback and you guys can give us your feedback on what works, because we want everybody to have a healthy process.
Yeah, there are a lot of folks out there talking about Shaktipat as a means to spiritually awaken, and one of the underlying principles of our research is that there is an intelligent energy that is responsible for this entire process of spiritual awakening. And that energy is not understood really at all. We know that there's something there. There's a lot of folks working, including this project, to try to figure out how we can measure that. But how that energy works between individuals is something that is still a closed book. So I would say, in terms of Shaktipat and going to a guru to try to awaken Kundalini, consider also that going to a guru and receiving some sort of ceremony or some sort of Shaktipat, consider the effect that your own confidence that the process will work, and your own confidence in your own spiritual development, how that changes as you go through one of these experiences. So, it's not that they can tap their wand on your head and you'll awaken all of a sudden, be a full-blown higher conscious person. But
it can happen.
But we don't know. And I would say, though, that, again, being a biological process, and if you think about how this energy works, there's probably only so much that Shaktipat can do. There's only so much that any one individual can do for another person to have them awaken in the proper way. The rest of it has to be your own perseverance. It has to be your own push towards your goal. And I think that's the important thing to remember there. Laz, anything else on Shaktipat?
I'm good.
I'm a little nervous to approach this subject, but rightly or wrongly, I actually performed a Shaktipat on my daughter. So I'm very interested to see what effect that will have as she grows up.
Interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that's, we always take the stance of a researcher. It could be, it's been a tradition in India for a long time, and so there may be something there. And I think as the research continues and we understand the effect of Kundalini between one person and another, passing through maybe some other medium that we don't understand, even quantum physics tells us that there's a lot of interactions across spaces that we don't really understand.
It's like lighting another candle or something.
Yeah, it could. Yeah, lighting another candle. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I see we still have quite a few questions now. Very interesting ones.
Yeah, we do have more questions. I know that we're already 15 minutes over. We had booked an hour for the event. Want to be respectful to everybody's time. Our apologies, we couldn't get to all of the questions, but I think what we might do is just compile a list, and then we'll see if we can maybe get some notes together for a post-meeting follow-up.
That'll be nice. Can you save these?
Yes.
Cool. All right. Thank you guys so much. We really appreciate all of you.
Thank you, guys. I hope this has been of some use to you guys out there.
Yes, and thank you too, Laz, for taking the time. We really appreciate it.
So stay tuned for our follow-up email to the group. Everyone's going to get a sign-up form who registered for the event. And go ahead and go through that email, and we will be following up with you in the following days and weeks on the launch of the project, which is again on June 29th in 5 days.
Really excited.
Happy to have you here. Thank you for joining, and have a great rest of your day.